Katelynn.
Dave!
Oh, I am so excited to see you today. You have no idea. No idea.
Me too.
It's funny, we were just talking before we went live that this is now week 3, and every single week we have matched and we haven't planned it at all, which is so cool. We are so in sync. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. We're the
same page.
And before we'll do the fancy intro music and all that stuff in just a second, but I do want to throw a caveat out there for people. This is week 3, a focus on the focus. We are talking grading, assessment, a whole lot of other amazing conversations that get us both fired up. And I want to warn people, again, something else we talked about before we went live. We're both feeling a little feisty today. we both had those days where we're coming in here ready to have some good conversations, to stir the pot a little bit, poke some bears and get going. So people, if you enjoy that kind of thing, you're in the right place. WWE on a Wednesday night. Let's go. We're ready to fight. We're ready to have some conversations, help and brainstorm, do all those things. So, Katelynn, are you ready for me to do the promo music, that little intro thing, and then we'll come back and start talking?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do this. All right, Katelynn Giordano, the queen of grading and assessment, the woman who just makes everybody feel smarter when they are talking to her. I am so happy that you are here tonight.
Thanks, Dave. I'm just so excited to be here with you today. Like, I have to say, I was looking forward to this today. I'm feeling a little feisty, and I was like, all right, I'm ready for my conversation with Dave later.
No, this is going to be good. I told you that this morning I got my second COVID shot, so I feel like I'm Superman right now, and I'm ready to go to battle. I feel like nothing's going to stick to me right now, and we can have some good debates and some good conversations. So this is encouragement. People, friends, if you're joining us live right now, drop some questions, comments in the chat. We're going to be talking about some things today that you might disagree with. I guarantee that actually a lot of what we're going to be talking about, there are going to be some people that disagree with some of our opinions. So we're ready to have those debates. We're hoping that you can sharpen our saws a little bit and maybe teach us a few things. So this is going to be fun. Katelynn, are you ready?
I'm so ready. I think like one of the reasons I'm so excited for today is because we are going to be talking about some of the things that tend to come up when we talk about changing our grading practices, the things that kind of get in our way, the obstacles that kind of come into mind, like, okay, I don't know if I can do this because. So one of the things that Dave and I really want to hear from all of you out there watching today is what those are. We want you to share those with us, because one of the things we really want to talk through is what is standing in our way and how we can kind of get past it, or maybe ways that Dave and I have experienced teachers or even tried ourselves to get past them.
Absolutely. I'm calling this Sir Mix-a-Lot night. This is the night where we're looking for those big butts. Throw those things you say, I would do this, but throw the big butts in the comment and let us know what is getting in the way. Because we've heard a lot of things. We've experienced a lot of things. And I'm going to be very honest with you tonight, Katelynn. Back when I was a classroom teacher, there are a lot of these butts that I'll be talking through were some of these big butts that I used to stop myself from doing what was ultimately best for kids and some of the things that I preach about now. So I'm ready.
It's going to be a good one. Okay. I'm so ready.
All right. So let's set the stage. Week 3, this is crazy to say. In 26 minutes, we're halfway done with this series already. That makes me sad.
Makes me sad.
So this is week 3. If you're listening on the podcast or rewind, go back and listen to the other 2 if you haven't heard them yet. This is the 3rd one. If this is your first time joining us, no worries. We'll get you caught up to speed. Long story short is Katelynn and I like to talk about grading. We like to talk about assessment. We like to talk about a lot of the stuff that a lot of others say, I don't want to talk about that, but we have very passionate opinions about it. We are going to prompt you and prod you and encourage you to possibly change what you do, or hopefully convict you to go out there and inspire others to do what you do, right?
Do something.
Do something. Okay. So, so far in the first 2 weeks, first week, we just set the stage, talked about grades. What are they? They are arbitrary symbols that we use to document feedback or evidence. Week 2, we talked about measuring what matters and how we actually set up some of the measurement. I think some of those conversations are coming up today. Today, you and I each have a big topic that we want to bring up. I want to talk about zeros, and you want to talk about deadlines.
Yep.
Where do we go first? I tell you what, you're feeling feisty today. And I'm not going to make you wait. I know you've got things that you want to say. So let's start with deadlines and where that comes into this whole conversation. I know a lot of people, I've heard this, and I'll play devil's advocate for some of your points today, say, I would do standards-based grading, but it just lets the kids be in total control. They're just turning things in whenever they want to. And then I get flooded with assignments at the end of a marking period because you're just letting kids redo things all the time. And there's just no control of what's happening. So deadlines. I would do this, but I've got deadlines. In my school, we've got 4 marking periods. Deadlines. I would do this, but deadlines, Katelynn.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So couple things to unpack there. And by couple things.
Okay, people. If this is your first time ever hearing the one and only Katelynn Giordano, when she drops couple things, be ready to take some notes, because couple things means she's about to start preaching. So Katelynn, bring us a couple things.
All right. So a couple of things there. Number one, you mentioned the word control and the students having all the control and just being in control and all of this stuff. I am a control freak. If you know me in any capacity, you know that I like to have things done a specific way at a specific time. I'm a planner. That's my personality. Absolutely nobody is telling you to completely get rid of everything you've ever had. No one is saying that. You need to ask yourself what it is that you're truly craving. And this was a moment for me that was incredibly powerful in my practice. Am I craving control, where I tell the children what to do, how to do it, where to sit, how to breathe? No, I'm not craving control. I'm craving structure. Structure and control are 2 completely different things. And nobody is telling you to get rid of structure, because students, children thrive in structured environments. But structure doesn't mean, hey, you have to do everything my way. That's control. Structure is where the deadlines can come into the conversation. My classroom, my school district, every single place that I've worked has always had deadlines. Always. You have to have deadlines in some circumstances that are, one, out of your control, like the end of the quarter. You don't get to pick that. That's not up to you. You also can have deadlines. Like we write essays in my classroom. If I let an essay go on for the entire year, I would be getting an essay we taught in first quarter in May now, and we wouldn't have talked about it forever. You can have deadlines and still go standards based. You can have deadlines and still allow redos. And Dave is like itching to say something. Go ahead, Dave.
No. I've got thoughts on this, but before I share my thoughts, let's play the game that we kind of played last week, where instead of me giving my thoughts, I will possibly give what some other people might be thinking. So first of all, let me comment on what some of the people are putting in the comments. This idea of talking about zeros and deadlines is spot on, where some people want to go. Chelsea says, let's do this. And Candace is saying that structure is her best friend. But I guess I want to challenge this notion that kids thrive on structure, because I've got 4 kids that live under my roof, and there are socks thrown everywhere. There are goldfish crackers everywhere. They have bedtimes, but they push the limit every night and want to stay up late every single night. They don't want to wake up when the alarm clock goes off. They push the limits. Every limit I put in front of them, they push it and say, I don't want to live in that box. You know, I've heard people say that kids thrive on structure. Is it really kids that thrive on structure, or is it just the teachers that want structure?
So I would say that structure doesn't necessarily mean everybody is doing exactly what you say all the time. And it's natural for kids to push boundaries too. That's just something that happens. I'm not a parent, so I can't speak to it in that regard. But in my classroom, I want kids to question why we're doing things the way that we're doing them, or why they have to do a particular thing, because I better have a reason why we're doing it. Otherwise, we shouldn't be doing it. But that's a whole other conversation.
Ooh. It's not another conversation. Can we go there real quick?
Yeah. Oh my God,
think,
go for it.
I think you just got to the heart of this entire issue. That your issue is not deadlines. Your issue is deadlines for no reason. Your issue is doing anything for no reason.
Correct.
It's this arbitrary nature of arbitrary rules, arbitrary hoops, arbitrary deadlines. Is that what I'm hearing you say, Katelynn?
Absolutely, 100% true. If you're having a deadline in place or you're having structure of any kind, it's clear communication what's expected. It's clear communication of what students need to know, be able to do, need to accomplish. And there should be a reason for why you have that in place. If I'm assigning a deadline to my students, it takes some adjustment, I will say, because I don't assign deadlines like right when I give something out. When we start an essay, my students have to get used to the fact that I'm not telling them, this is due in 2 weeks. Because that would be arbitrary. That would just be me pulling that out of nowhere and just deciding we're going to be done with this essay in 2 weeks. They get used to it over time, but you communicate like, okay, we're starting this now. And as time goes on, I have this little heading, part of their heading. It's silly, but it's a small thing that works, where I always put the due date as a part of their heading. And for the beginning of anything we do, it always says TBD, because we don't know what it is yet. We don't know what the deadline's going to be. We don't know when the due date is. And we talk about it as we go, like, okay, how's everybody doing? I can check in with my students along the way and determine like, okay, we're all at this point in the body of our essay. I know that we're going to be hitting conclusions soon and then revisions. I can probably determine when this is going to be due. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't allow students to turn things in late either. It means that this is the deadline. But we're talking about a behavior after that. If we're turning something in late, what is the reason for that behavior? Be curious. Ask questions. Don't immediately assign a consequence without understanding what's going on. Your students are people. You need to understand that like something may legitimately have come up that they weren't able to finish. Do you really want them to turn in something that's not their best work for you to assess? I don't. I want to see everything that they're capable of when they turn it in. If that means that the due date needs to be more flexible, that one student needs an extension, absolutely 100% they can have it. It's a great opportunity too, as a classroom teacher, to have real conversations about responsibility and accountability with your kids. We talk a lot in my classroom about if you need an extension, you just have to talk to me. And the right time to talk to me is probably not after the deadline. And it's just one of those lessons that we learn about life and about the future and about what we're going to need to know how to do and advocate for ourselves as we move through the world.
That's good. That's good. So I do want to respond to what you just said, but I also want to comment on the amazing conversation happening in the chat. We talked about this last week after we were live. We were like, oh my gosh, how amazing is it that all these people are just having this private conversation publicly in the chat? They don't need us. They're just having this amazing conversation. So people, carry on, talk in the back of the room, continue to grow each other. I love it. Just allow me to continue to be that little spy watching your comments flood my screen. I love it. So I guess here's yet another pushback, Katelynn. So you're talking about deadlines, but allowing kids to turn things in after. I wouldn't call that a deadline. That's like a reincarnation line. It's a zombie line. It's not really dead, right? If kids can jump right over that deadline and turn things in late, why even have a deadline to begin with? So that's my last confrontation. And then I want to jump in and support this because I actually 1000% agree with everything you're saying. But I've heard people say this. Well, if you're going to just allow kids to push the boundaries and circumvent whatever rules you have in place, why even have the rule?
So I would argue that it's not a rule. It's not this thing that I'm like just deciding, like coming down from on high, stone tablets, here you go, here's a rule, everybody follow it. It's more of like we kind of come to this deadline together. It's not, again, something I'm just assigning arbitrarily to my students without really thinking through it, without checking in on their progress, without understanding this is where we need to be. It's one of those things that, yes, I'm going to allow students that additional time if they need it, but you still want to have that goal that you're working towards. You still want to have that ability to say like, okay, we are working towards this together. Here is our intended target. Sometimes we miss a target. Yeah. And that happens. It just does. We have to learn how to deal with that and what to do with that when it is happening, which is where that lesson can come in and where students can learn that skill. but you have this opportunity to work on that. And you do want to make sure you have that in place. I'm 100% a fan of deadlines. Like I am, because it's just something that you have to do.
Which is interesting, because a lot of people, when they hear standards-based grading, say, but there's no deadlines with standards-based grading. It's all this self-paced stuff. Students are in control. So how can you support deadlines and still support standards-based instruction or grading reform, which is interesting. And Rebecca threw an interesting comment here, and I'm going to promise her that we're going to talk about this, if not right here in this part, definitely when we start talking about zeros, this question about what if students just don't use class time effectively? And I love that she wrote a big but in there too. Big B, big U, big T. She has a big old but. But what about students that don't use class time effectively? Again, we'll come back to that, because I know that's a big question for people. That we have these deadlines, but some kids just don't do what they're supposed to do. Before we get to that one, though, I want to take people on a little trip with me, if that's okay. I'm going to take people back more than a decade to one of these moments where my mind kind of shifted and changed, and where I had one of these reflective ahas. Before I really started diving into grading practices and assessment, I truly thought that the way that I had always done things was just fine. I was a classroom teacher, and I was a good teacher. I was an assistant principal, a good assistant principal, a good principal, all the things. And I was trying to perpetuate the system. And then my first year as a middle school principal, and some people have already read this story, so I apologize if that's you, but if you haven't, hear me out. This is where my mind started to wrap around all of this. My first year as a middle school principal, I had to go in and start doing observations of teachers. And I was trying to make a name for myself and thought I can go a couple of ways when I'm doing these observations. I can go in and I can be a jerk and just go in and start nailing people and saying, I'm going to give them all kinds of critical evidence so they know I'm in control. Or I can go for that teacher that everybody already thinks is amazing and just go validate the snot out of them and say that they're amazing, and then send this image that Schmidto's here to support us. That's the route I went. Okay. I went, and my first observation was of a teacher that had the reputation of being the best teacher ever. And if I'm being completely honest with you, she was amazing. She would like stand on her head and do cartwheels. The kids would laugh. Nobody's staring at the clock. Nobody's going to the bathroom. Like, the kids are just enthralled in her class. She was like a department chair, a grade level chair, doing all the things, super organized, knew all the rules. And in my observation, I'm documenting all this and can't wait to leave her a ton of feedback. As I'm getting ready to leave her room after 40 minutes, I walk by her door, and I remember this very, very clearly. It was a Monday that I was observing her. Monday, the very first week of the month. On her, right next to her door, she had a full-size calendar for the month. This was a Monday. The following Wednesday, 10 days later, she had written on her calendar, test day. And I remember writing down, wow, she's so organized. She already knows when she's going to give a test. Interesting. Went back down to my office and started writing all this stuff up. And then I started wondering and had a lot of questions. I started thinking, how does she know she's going to give a test 10 days from now? How did that deadline creep in? Why did she arbitrarily say next Wednesday, all the kids are going to be ready to learn? If she knows the kids are going to be ready to learn next Wednesday, why does she need to give the kids a test if she already knows what they need to know? But if she doesn't know that they need to know this, if she doesn't know they're ready, how can she magically just pick this date out? And it just sent my mind spinning. I was like, oh my gosh, I need to find answers. And that's when I started like looking for stuff, because I'm now the boss and I have to be able to explain my wonderings. And I have to stand beside this teacher when I ask these critical questions and act like I know something. But it got me really thinking about this, the arbitrary nature of deadlines. Because again, she was an amazing teacher. She is still an amazing teacher. But she did arbitrarily pick a date on a calendar for when something was going to be due. Deadlines are okay. Arbitrary deadlines, though, are normally not necessarily because of the kids. They're normally because of us. And that's where the question comes into play.
Absolutely. And it's important to reflect on that when you are trying to figure out a deadline or something like that. And I will be honest, a lot of your students are going to feel a little weird about it at first if you don't assign a deadline right when you assign something you're giving them. Yeah. They're used to that. That's something that they've had for a while. And typically, if we're giving an activity, we can say things like, okay, we're gonna get this done by tomorrow so that we can continue on. So they're used to that. So when it comes to these longer pieces, when it comes to something that you're not necessarily assigning a deadline for right away, communicate that very explicitly with them. Like, we're not assigning a deadline yet because I don't know when we're going to be done. I don't know when we're going to be finished. And then one other thing that I wanted to mention too, that I feel like is one of these things that I've started doing, and I really have noticed that it's a positive impact on my students, is that I will set deadlines for myself and communicate that with them.
Explain why.
So deadlines for like when I'm going to have some feedback for them, when I'm going to have it done and ready and sent back, I'll tell them, you will get this back from me on Tuesday. I intend to finish giving you all feedback by Tuesday. And then I kind of update them throughout the process. Like I'll tell them, okay, we're doing really well. Like I think I'm ahead of schedule. You might get your feedback by Monday. Or there have been times where I've been like, all right, folks, something came up yesterday. You're not going to get your feedback from me on Tuesday. Like I said, it probably won't be until Wednesday. But it's the idea that I also have deadlines and I'm communicating those with you. And the reason that I have them. So you're giving them that reinforcement, that modeling, that showing like, it's not just you, it's not just arbitrary. Like I want to model this practice too. So it also gives them that piece as well of if you're going to miss a deadline, you don't wait until you've missed the deadline to tell them. You communicate that early, you let them know what's going on. So it's just a positive practice that you can put into place that does help see this in action. It helps your students see it in action too.
That's good. That's good. I'm going to jump in and address another question that Rebecca threw out here, because I think it's another good one. And Rebecca's on fire today with asking some questions. Number one, this idea of without some of these deadlines, it feels like you can just get totally stressed out because kids can just wait and turn everything in at the last minute. They can wait till the fourth quarter and just start dumping things on you 2 days before the marking period ends and just turn a heap of stuff in and say, I need all my credit now. I'll give a short response to that. And then Katelynn, I'll let you like dive into the weeds, because I know this is like, I can see it already. You're fired up and ready to go. But this plays into this whole idea of arbitrary deadlines. And it actually goes into what we talked about a little bit about last week of what are we even measuring? So Rebecca, to answer your question specifically, saying that a grade that we throw in at the end of 10 weeks is more important than a grade that we assign today or tomorrow or yesterday or right now in this moment, trying to say that an aggregate grade at the end of a marking period is more important than anything else is the issue. The issue isn't the deadline. If every single thing that we picked up from students was evidence of learning, and every single thing that we assigned a grade to was documented as evidence of learning and was reported back as evidence of learning, and we then use that to plan for future instruction, all assessments are going into our grade book as evidence, as quality evidence, which means just because it's at the end of 10 weeks or if it's on a random Wednesday in the middle of the month, it's all the same. It should all be the same. It's not this big aggregate mixture and mess of things. And if we start to treat it that way, where I could look at a grade book at any time, a parent could look at a grade book at any time, a student could look at a grade book at any time, or any assessment portal at any time and say, this is evidence of where I am right now, which is what grades are supposed to be, feedback from a snapshot in time. If we treat them all the same in every moment and every piece of time the same, then we eliminate that hurdle. The obstacle isn't the fact that there's loose deadlines or that kids can turn things in with redos and retakes. The issue is that we put more emphasis on this arbitrary date of the end of a marking period than we do on Wednesday or Thursday or Tuesday or last week. That's the issue.
Yes. Yes. I everything you said is true. There are ways that you can kind of circumvent that system. There are little things that you can do in your classroom that I've definitely done in my own journey that I'm happy to share with anybody anytime, like little things you can do to kind of make sure that end of quarter grade that holds so much value, so much weight, so much unnecessary pressure. There are ways that you can abate that. There are things that you can do when you're ready to take that step in your practice to get there. But for the time being, all I would say is this, and Candace is like rocking it out in the chat with this idea. If the work that you're assigning students is valuable, which it should be, because you shouldn't be giving them something that isn't, they should do it no matter when it is, because it's a learning opportunity for them. It is something that is going to aid them on their understanding of your content area. If you are assigning work that matters, that holds value, and not point value, but learning value, You should want your students to do it no matter what.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that you have to take that pressure onto yourself then, because this is like a whole other thing. You don't have to take that pressure onto yourself to get feedback on it immediately.
Yeah.
You can communicate to students, I prioritize assignments that were turned in on time. Yours will I will give you feedback. I promise, I will get there, but it may take me longer. Open, honest, direct communication. Always, no matter what.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I'm going to throw in another big but here that somebody else is throwing in, because this is one that I heard a lot. And so I'll throw the big but on the screen first. The big but is, but Dave, that arbitrary deadline determines my eligibility for sports. But Dave, the grade that students get at the end of a marking period at the end of the week determines whether or not they can dress for the game on Friday. But Dave, the system won't allow this. So Katelynn, you're ready to burst. I'll let you go first this time if you want to.
Nope, you go.
Okay, so couple of thoughts to this. Couple things. Let me just be very direct again. Just because a system is broken doesn't mean we don't adjust and change and do what's best for kids. That's number one. Number two, I have no problem with making sure that kids are eligible for sports. No problem with making sure that kids are doing what they need to do in order to go out and do extra things. My problem is when we start attaching aptitude and competency and mastery to that equation. If a kid is not playing by the rules and doing their job and doing the work and showing up and giving me their best effort, then yeah, I want a coach to hold a kid accountable. I want to be able to support that some way, somehow. Again, I'll use my dad example here. As a dad, when I look at my child's report card, I know there are some things that I can help my children with and some things I can't. If a teacher throws some comments on the report card and says that my child is off task and distracting, showing up late to every single class, I guarantee you that as a dad, I'm fixing those behaviors. If I get a report card grade that says my son is struggling with quadratic equations, I be honest with you, I have no idea how to help with that. It's good information, but I can't help with that like I can some of those other behaviors. Similarly, the basketball coach, the football coach, the softball coach, the track coach can probably help motivate and inspire a kid to keep his mouth shut in class or to stop showing up late, all of those sorts of behaviors. If you disaggregate the information, provide citizenship grades or rubric-based behavior grades or comments just based off of behavior and attach eligibility to that, A, the coach is going to have a much better understanding of what's happening and how they can help. B, the student is going to know exactly what's working and what's not, and you're actually going to see some real results. So my first point to you would be bring up this conversation with your administration and say, what are we really after here? And if the answer is, well, if a kid's struggling in class, they simply need to study more, then we might need to have a conversation, number one, about how kids actually learn. But that's a whole another conversation for probably another day. Katelynn, what do you have?
Yes, no, everything you said is exactly it. And I can tell you this too. I coach. I coach sports at my school. Anytime that a student is ineligible, the first thing that I am doing is reaching out to the teacher to ask what is going on. Reaching out to the kid, reaching out to the teacher to find out what is happening. It is a quick email that I send. If that teacher tells me they're doing everything, they're just struggling with this concept, they're eligible, cool, great, awesome. I can talk to admin and be like, great, they can play. We worked it out. There are have a conversation. That's literally like my theme right now. Conversation, talk to people.
That's good. And Rebecca Rebecca, I feel like you got your COVID shot today too. You are ready to fight a little bit. I love this because you're asking some amazing questions. So Rebecca, I would put your comment on the screen, but nobody would be able to see Katelynn and I if I did that because it's such a long one. But I love your point here. The question is, this feels like the entire educational system needs a reset. You know, you write in your comment that philosophically you agree, but you feel like you're just a small fish and you don't know how to change all of these things. And I'm going to, I guess I'll be very real and honest and direct with you and say it is a big deal. It is hard to move these things. And the fact that you recognize that, first, I want to say amen and kudos to you, because that's one of the first points we wanted to make in our very first week, is that this isn't a conversation just about changing ABCs to 1, 2, 3s. Once you start making some of these changes, it truly can disrupt everything. So to that point, I'll also say the exciting thing is when you make some of these small shifts, it truly can disrupt everything. And Katelynn and I are two examples of those small fish that have asked the questions enough to enough people, that changes have been made. Changes have been made, and we get to work with people all the time that ask these questions to the people that they work with, that spark the conversations that lead to change. You got to be willing to poke that bear from time to time.
You do. And it can be very overwhelming. It can be frightening. I get it. Being a classroom teacher, feeling like that small fish in this huge pond of what the institution of education, it's a lot. And it's a lot to tell yourself, like, okay, can I really be the person that does this? Can I really ask the questions? Can I really poke the bear? Yeah, you can. I'm giving you permission.
There you
but
go.
You, outside of that, you should. Like, you recognize that this is a problem. You know it's a problem. And as scary as it is, as uncomfortable as it is to be like, hey, this is a problem. I have an idea for how we might fix it. You should, because you can.
Yeah. And I'll say one of the best ways to start a conversation is sometimes just asking a question or blaming somebody else for making you ask the question. Feel free to go to somebody tomorrow again and say, hey, I was listening to Dave and Katelynn last night, and they asked some questions I didn't have the answers to. What would you say if they asked you this? And that's a great conversation starter. Feel free to argue about what we're saying, get their opinions on our takes, and then that opens the door to more conversation. So take that and run with it. I love it. Katelynn, can I throw in the zero conversation now? I'm dying for this.
Dave, yes, please.
Okay, because this is perhaps one of the biggest butts that I see is this idea of zeros and the question of, do zeros fit in grading reform? And I'm going to say something that people probably don't expect me to say, and I'm going to be very direct about it. Yes, they do. I believe wholeheartedly zeros belong in grading reform. Zeros are not the problem at all. And I'm going to throw something out here, and this whole idea of get rid of the zeros and change them to 60s. Oh my gosh. I strongly disagree with that as well. Wholeheartedly strongly disagree. Can I explain why, or should I just let that sit and roast for a little bit?
But Dave, why?
Oh, you did a good job with that. That was a good butt. Because zeros aren't the problem. Zeros are not the problem. The problem is having a 100-point percentage-based scale. That is the problem. It presents so many issues when we start saying that grades are on a 100-point scale. And I'll just throw a few things at you just to begin with. The first problem this presents is that we assume that grades or learning has a beginning and an end. When we grade anything on a 0 to 100, we're saying that 100 represents the end or perfection or great or it's all good, and 0 represents nowhere close. It's just beginning. It hasn't even started yet. To say that learning fits anywhere in that continuum is a falsehood. It is incorrect. It is inaccurate. It does not exist. And we've given examples of this over the last 3 weeks. You think of anything you've ever learned in your life, and you tell me where the beginning point of that learning was. Whether it was learning to read, learning to walk, learning to talk, learning to ride a bike, anything. Tell me the beginning point of it. Tell me the end point of it. When do you stop learning to read? When do you stop learning math? When do you stop? You don't. So to say there's a beginning and an end, that's the first problem. The second problem in this whole percents points fiasco that we have is that percents don't accurately measure anything. They measure frequency. They don't measure accuracy. They don't measure mastery. They represent the percent of times that you get something correct out of some arbitrary number of times that you got something correct. So it's complete garbage. I believe that if a kid does not produce evidence of learning, then their score represents 0 because they have not shown you any evidence of learning. So that is 0. That is accurate. That is 100% accurate. However, I also believe that every grade should lead to the next thing, which means giving a kid a 0, if you're doing that and you are done, shame on you, because that has not led to the next thing. A 0 leads you to do something else. It leads the student to do something else. It is simply evidence in a moment of time. But if you have no evidence, A 0 represents no evidence. Katelynn, what do you think?
So, Dave, everything that you're saying is spot on. And I think that the issue with the 0 conversation is, to me, it's such a false issue. It's just the straw man argument. You're trying to throw this out there because in order to say like, oh yeah, 0s, we should get rid of them totally, completely, you are assuming that we need to continue operating within a system that is broken, that does not work.
Yes.
That's the biggest issue. The other piece of it is the argument I hear all the time about 0s is like, oh, well, it's going to completely tank a student's grade. Nothing they could do once they get a 0 is going to allow them to get out of that hole. Nothing that they do can help them come back. There's 50 ways, 60 ways to fail and 40 ways to succeed. Again, you are, number one, operating in a broken system and assuming that you're going to continue operating in that broken system, which is absolutely not what we want to do. We want to change the system. Yes. The second piece of it is that you're also assuming that everything needs to be an average. That's the piece of this argument that I just can't stand. Why do we use an average? If we're not using an average, if we're not taking an average of all these like random little scores that are out of however many points, 127, whatever. If we're taking this random average at the end and there's a 0 in there, yeah, it's going to tank the grade. But again, is the learning an average of all of these pieces over time? What if now your student can show you mastery of every skill that you've taught throughout this grading period? What if they can demonstrate that mastery to you now at the end of this grading period at this deadline that you have?
Yes.
Then shouldn't we reflect that?
Okay. So yes. So first of all, the mean is mean. We have said that when you use the mean, it is mean. Mean meaning the average. You take all the scores and merge them together for some mystical reason. Why we do that is complete hogwash, BS. It's the most inaccurate way to come up with an average of any. We only use it in baseball statistics. That's the only, and free throws. That's it. But even that is completely a falsehood, and we can talk about that as much as we want. But let me just use this example as for a teacher. Okay. So, Katelynn, let's say that tomorrow I show up to observe you because I'm your principal, but you're not there. You're sick. You're sick tomorrow. You're not in school. Okay. But I show up in your classroom. I forgot that you have a sub. I walked in. You're getting a 0 because you're not there. But I show up on Friday and you are there and you kill it. It's amazing. Best teacher I ever saw. Sorry about your luck. You had a 0 on Thursday, 100 on Friday. You get a 50. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, yes.
But that's what we do to kids. That's exactly. Oh, but you were sick. It shouldn't go against you if you're sick. What difference does it make? It's all about the evidence that I'm collecting in the moment. At that moment, if I come back to your room on Monday and you're there and it's just an okay lesson, it's an okay observation, well, then that's the evidence I'm going to use to build off of. We have to get off this idea that grades are supposed to be punitive, that kids will only do things if I assign grades, and I have to use a 0 to inspire them to do something else. I'm going to challenge you, teachers, that 0 should be inspiring you to do something else.
Zeros only work for the kids who don't get them.
Yes. A bad grade is only motivation to a good student. And I hate even saying a good student and bad student and all that, but I hope you get the gist of that. A 0 is only motivation for the kids that don't get them. As Katelynn just said, spot on. Ultimately, a 0 is just like any other grade in the grade book. It should always lead to what's next. Period. End of story. But just, again, if we go back to the very simple concept that every grade is simply shorthand for the feedback we want to provide to evidence. That's it. If there's no evidence, there's no evidence. But let's just use an example. Let's say that I am on trial, that I'm on trial for something. And I did something horrific. It was totally horrific. Katelynn, you are the lawyer. You are prosecuting me. You know I did it. You know I did it. I haven't confessed to it. There is no smoking gun. No gun. I didn't confess. You're the lawyer. You know I did it. Are you going to stop right there and say, he didn't confess? I couldn't find the weapon. Let him go free. Or are you going to dig and say, no, I'm going to put together enough evidence to prove the case? Yes, exactly. Same thing. That's what we're doing. We have to collect evidence to show what a kid knows. Just because there's no smoking gun, just because there's no confession, doesn't let us off the hook. And a 0, when we start saying, Zeros don't fit. They don't fit in a broken system. So fix the system. Don't get rid of the zero. That's my thought. Katelynn?
No, I agree with you completely. And it's like you said, any grade that we give, and we said this in the first week, and we're going to say it forever. Any grade you give should be a reflection of student understanding at that moment in time, academic understanding. That's what you're communicating. If you have nothing, a zero reflects that, because that's where you're at. It's very interesting to me, this idea that we have to give a 50% just so that we can make some 100-point system work. That's not the issue. Like, we need to be looking at this system. And it comes back to this idea of like, okay, well, I'm just a teacher in a classroom. What can I do? There are things you can do.
Yeah.
I will tell you 100%, having all my assignments weighted at 0% of the total grade so it wouldn't take an average was one of the first steps that I took. And it's really, really easy to do. You can still continue reporting where your students' understanding is across the board on individual assignments, on individual assessments, however you report it. Weighting it at 0 allows you to not have any average be taken. And it's you guys, we got to stop putting Band-Aids on bullet holes here. We have to.
I would even argue that this whole 0 to a 50 or 0 to 60, it's not a Band-Aid. I don't know what it is. It's like pouring rubbing alcohol onto a wound and thinking it's going to take the pain away. It doesn't do it. It does the exact opposite. It's sweeping things under the rug, and the rug just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's all it does, is it hides the problem. And it doesn't solve a thing. It doesn't solve a thing. It leads to 1,000 more questions. Hence the pushback when people say, why should a kid get 50 or 60 for doing nothing? You're right. Why should they? You have zero evidence. So now you have a score that is 100% distorted and inaccurate. The issue is using percentages. So let me just give you another hypothetical example for percentages. We talked a little bit about this last week with measurement, but just to kind of prove the case here. So we're playing basketball. We're shooting free throws. Okay. You make 8 free throws in a row, 8 out of 8. What is your free throw percentage, Katelynn?
100%.
100%, because you made the only 8 free throws I let you shoot. But let's say I give you the ball and say, now shoot another 92, and you miss all of those, Katelynn. What is your percentage now?
Like 0.
It's 8%. It's 8%. 8 out of 100. Okay. It's all because of this arbitrary number of how many problems, how many questions, how many assignments do I give you? That's the issue. So you give a kid 10 problems, they get 8 of them right, they get an 80%, they get 0 credit for the last 2. But what if you had stopped and said you're only going to get 8 problems? Or what if there are only 4 problems? What if you made it 80 problems? This arbitrary nature of how many does a kid have to get right for me to think that they've got enough information is ridiculous. Yeah, we'll go back and we'll start talking about 3 again. But that's the issue. It's the arbitrary nature of how we calculate scores and these deadlines we throw on when things have to be learned by that become the issue. It's the arbitrary issue, not
100%.
Zeros and deadlines.
100%. And Dave, I really want to.
What did you say? 100%? No, Katelynn. We got to go back and reteach this.
A+. No, I'm just kidding. I really want to pick apart something that you said, because I feel like, not in a bad way, in a positive way.
Oh, okay. Go ahead then.
I should use different terminology, but whatever. That has a negative connotation. Sorry, English friends. One of the things that I just find so valuable about what you said is that we are looking at grades as a punitive thing. We are using them as a punishment. And truly, a lot of what we're doing in a traditional system is that. When you have an arbitrary deadline, why are you setting it that way? So you can catch however many kids don't hit it. Why are you giving a 0? Is it to punish? Is it to show like, oh, yep, sorry, we're done. You have a 0. You're going to fail now. Like, what is the purpose? But the thing that I want to mention to people, and what I've noticed myself in my own journey towards a more standards-based system, towards a system that was focused on learning and growth, is that when your grading practices stop being punitive, when they start being progression-based, when they start being focused on learning and growth, it's amazing. Like, I'm almost at a loss for words, because you can genuinely see the growth that kids make. because that's what your grades are doing in that when you make this change.
Oh,
you can genuinely see how a student goes from not understanding a skill to understanding it and showing you that they understand it.
yes.
You get to see that happen, and it's written right there in front of you. You focus on it because that's what your focus is in a grading system that works well. You can see it because you're focused on the right thing. You're focused on the focus.
Yes. So much truth in all of that, Katelynn. And, you know, there are comments flowing in here. Mike's throwing this in there and a couple other people threw it in there, that this is all good. It's all well and good, but the system that we currently have doesn't allow this. I have to teach within a 100-point scale. There's a grading scale given to me by my district. There are pacing guides that tell me when I'm supposed to cover, what I'm supposed to cover, when I'm supposed to test. And I get all of that. And a lot of the things that we're talking about right now are things that will result from multiple conversations, maybe multiple months, multiple years. Completely acknowledge that. But I can also acknowledge that there are some simple things that we do every day right now that can lead to progress on this journey. I'll take it back to my time as a teacher, something I thought I was doing spot on right, that I look back now and think, I missed the boat there. So I used to tell my students, and I hope you understand this was with the best of intent, and it actually sounds good when I say it now. I would tell my students at the beginning of every marking period, you all start with an A. Every single one of you start the marking period with a 100% A. And it's up to you to keep it that way. My job, I'm going to start taking away points when you miss things. But you start with an A. You start with a 100%. And I said that to my students, like, guys, fresh start every single marking period. I see halos above your head. You're all my little angels. You all start with an A. What's wrong with that? Is there a problem with me saying that? I mean, I obviously I think there is now. Do you hear any problem with that, Katelynn?
Yeah, I do. And I don't want to I don't want to pick it apart without letting you kind of reflect on that first.
Yeah. So quite a few issues with it. Number one is that although I told my students I was looking at them from a fresh start, now I'm going at them from this deficit mindset the rest of the marking period. I now feel almost like it's my obligation to take points away from them. That's number one. Like I'm looking at it through my goal is to start chipping away at your mistakes and your misunderstandings. That's not my goal. My responsibility as a teacher is to constantly assess what you do know, not to start looking for your weaknesses and take things away from you. And number two, again, falsehood at the very beginning, assuming every single student already knows everything that's going to be taught in the future. Telling them that they have this A, which represents some sort of mastery, which maybe we can talk through even defining mastery, is a falsehood. And it was not accurate. Anytime I inaccurately represent what my grades mean, I am lying. I am not giving accurate feedback. I am destroying trust. Although I'm trying to be a good guy, my students no longer trust that grades are accurate representations of what they know and what they need to do, period.
That was my biggest issue with it, is you're starting off by communicating like, okay, we're all at an A, which if you're trying to work within a 100-point system, your students want that goal. They want to hit that A at the end of the quarter, which means they're going to have to show you that they've learned something. They're going to have to show you that they've mastered something, that they've achieved proficiency, that they can do something. They can do these skills that you've set out, which they're not starting there. Yeah. And that's, I think, my biggest issue, because it's increasing this stress then of, I'm not going to take any risks now to learn anything, because anytime I take a risk, something bad will happen and points will get taken away from me. Instead, like, I would challenge anybody that this conversation feels familiar to you. I would challenge anybody who's hearing a little bit of themselves in that, to instead start a marking period off by talking with your students about what's to come. What skills are we going to work on this marking period? And by communicating with them, like, it's okay if you've never heard of some of this yet. It's okay if some of this is totally new to you, because that's what we're here to do. And this is our marking period to learn this together. This is the marking period where I get to teach this skill to you, and we get to work on that progress through this time. And if you change that communication a little bit, that's not even necessarily about grading specifically, but you're really kind of shifting what you value in your classroom, and you're shifting the way that you communicate those values to your students. We're all learning here. We're all trying something new. There are things that we're going to talk about that come up that you may not know yet. And that's okay, because that's what I'm here to do, is to teach. That's what we're here to do together, is to learn and to grow. And you're shifting that. And that's what you want to be doing.
Yes, 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 and yes. It brings me back to a big vocabulary word for a lot of us: alignment. We need to make sure that what we're assessing is aligned to what we really need the kids to know, and that our feedback, aka our grades to students, are aligned to the same thing. That's what standards-based grading is all about. Your grades represent a student's understanding of the standard, not a bunch of other things that may be important that you may want them to know, but our assessments are aligned to the standard. And if it's okay for me to go back and again give another example of something that I may or may not have been guilty of, or I was, and I've also seen other people guilty of. I'll use a social studies example, if that's okay, because I spent a lot of time doing ELA, social studies. For some reason, math teachers seem like they're the easiest ones to convert to standards-based grading for some reason, and science with projects and allowing kids to really get their hands wet. It seems like that's an easy one. For some reason, I don't know, social studies seems to be a hard place for us to move the needle. So I'll use a social studies example. Let's just assume that there is a standard, again, a hypothetical standard, that asks us to explore the Civil War, and the standard might read, students will analyze major developments of the Civil War and their impact on society in the 1860s. Now, again, that's hypothetical. I just made that up. I did not read that from anything. Again, it reads, students will analyze major developments of the Civil War and their implications on society in the 1860s. Okay. Now, something that I may have done in my class when I was teaching U.S. history is I may have had my students take a quiz or test, homework assignment, some sort of in-class assignment, where I make them maybe look at a map of the United States back in the 1860s and label the map with major cities or where battles took place. Or I might have made them memorize who was a general in charge of specific battles. Or I might have made them label maps with battle sites or something along those lines to help them, thinking that's going to help them understand the standard. And I think that's a fair connection. The problem is, nothing in the standard does it ask for students to be able to memorize leaders, states, regions, any of that. If I'm doing anything to their grade based off of their ability to memorize vocabulary, to memorize anything, to label anything, to define anything, I've distorted the grade. If I truly want to get a student's assessment of whether or not they can do this standard, it is okay to simply give them that information, to say, here is a map of the United States in 1865. The first capital was Montgomery. The second capital was Richmond. And then have students maybe have to analyze why the Confederate capital moved from Montgomery to Richmond, and have them analyze that and talk about the economic impact and the historical impact, the geographic, and have them actually discuss the standard, the analysis. And that's the only thing I'm grading, because that's what the standard asks for. I can teach all that other stuff. I can give them all that other stuff. But the only thing I'm assessing, the only thing their grade is based off of, is the standard. Period. End of story.
And that goes back to what we talked about last week so perfectly.
Yes.
Because you are truly, in that instance, illustrating how we need to measure the skill, the academic skill. We need to measure what matters. We need to measure the thing that we have set out to accomplish, the objective. That's what we're looking to do. And that's a perfect example of it.
And I think that at times this comes into our deadlines conversation as well. Because I've heard teachers say, I would do that, but I don't have the time to get to that stuff because I have to teach all this other stuff. And my answer to you is, no, you don't. No, you don't. Your first assessment, we're going to talk about this next week, pre-assessment, post-assessment, all of that language that drives me nuts. Your initial assessment prior to your instruction should set the stage for where you need to go. If a student can do this standard on that first day, you've just saved yourself so much time because you don't have to teach any of that other stuff. But if they can't do this, then you can talk about geography and how major capital cities were typically formed on waterways and why. You can talk about the economic implications and trade. You can weave all that in once you understand what they know and what they don't know. but you only assess the standard so that you can figure out what you need to do next and what the student has to demonstrate next. Students should not have to climb ladders. They should not have to check boxes. They don't have to jump through arbitrary hoops because of your mystical deadlines, your arbitrary instructions, and the things you want to assess that don't matter.
It's true. And one of the things that I feel like can be really it can really shake us up when we're looking and thinking and reflecting on the activities, the learning, the assessments, the lessons, the things that we have in our classrooms. It can be really, really uncomfortable to look through those and realize there's a lot of stuff in here that isn't really what it should be. There's a lot of things that I'm doing that I may not even need to do at all. Mm-hmm. And that is one of those things that I would invite you all to lean into it. Mm. Don't allow that to be your reason not to do this. Don't allow it to take you and make you so uncomfortable that you're like, whatever, this is what I've always done and my kids all turned out fine. Take a minute and lean into that feeling. Let yourself be a little uncomfortable, because I promise that once you start paring down what you're assigning, once you start ensuring that your assessments are what you want them to be, are doing what you want them to do, are providing students opportunities to show what they know, it will be better. I promise.
Katelynn, I am so glad you brought this up. Probably 5-6 months ago, I was doing a Mastermind Rewind with Ray, and we took this tangent that I'm going to take right now because I think it's so powerful and so pivotal to what you just talked about. So about 2 years ago, I started going to therapy, like straight therapy, laying on the leather couch, talking to a counselor, right? And the first 2 weeks of therapy, it was golden. It was so easy. I was sitting around talking about all the fun things that I did, and this person was just stroking my ego, making me feel so wonderful about all I did. Week 3, I wanted to reach across and choke this counselor because I was like, you're getting into my personal space here. You are questioning, making me question who I am. You're making me question everything I've ever done. And it got so hard. So hard. Weeks 3, 4, 5, and 6 were so uncomfortable because that reflection process, it makes me squirm. And it's funny, the counselor told me that notoriously people show up for 3 weeks of counseling and then they quit. Because when it gets hard, when you have to start looking in the mirror and questioning what you've always done, it does get hard. But those people that stick with it leave so much better than when they first came in. And it's the same thing here, Katelynn. We're on week 3 right now. And we have people chopping in saying, I'm second guessing everything right now. I don't even know where to go. Do I even want to come back next week? And I'm hoping that you do. I'm hoping that right now, the reflective process that you're going through is opening the door to more questions, and that you're now chomping at the bit to say, I want more. I need more. I don't know where to go. I want somebody to stand beside me. I can't do this alone, because that's the reality. That's the reality. Even like people that are trying to get better, we think we're bound by the systems that we were raised in. My parents made me this way. My job made me this way. But we are in control of our own destinies. You are in control of your own grade book. You're in control of your own classroom. So
it's so true. You are. And honestly and truly, we are standing here with you. When you are looking for these ways to figure this out, when you're looking for ideas even for how to work around a system that isn't working for you, please reach out to us. Please know that we're coming back for 2 more weeks to talk more about this. Please know that Dave and I love these conversations. And folks, I have to tell you, some of the things that I've done in my own classroom, I love sharing with other people. Some of the things that I've done with weighting my grades at 0, with using grading conferences to meet that quarter grade deadline, that GPA problem that jumps up in our faces. I want to share that with you. Yeah. I want to make sure that you can ask those questions and be like, hey, like, how did you get around that? I want to talk about that. I want to share that with you because it works. And it's awesome to see it work in a classroom.
So good. And we said that from week 1, that if you leave each of these weeks with more questions than you walked in with, then I feel like we're doing our job. And I love the fact that so many of you are connecting with each other in the comments and forming this little network saying, we're in this together. People continue to connect. Don't just think you're going to get all of your answers on Wednesdays. On Wednesdays, you're going to get all the questions that hopefully lead you to the discovery throughout the week. That's our goal, helping you focus in on what needs to be your next step. So, Katelynn, next week we come back together again, and our conversation is formative versus summative. Talking about weighted grades, which assignments matter more? Should we be grading formative assessments and summative assessments? Like this is going to be a good one. And I'm also going to warn people, we've kind of scaffolded this whole conversation where hopefully today you understand that we're dismantling what a lot of things are that you thought you knew or you assumed that we would be saying. Next week will be no exception. We start talking formative and summative. Yeah. Katelynn, any final words from you? I feel like you were just dropping that mic like crazy tonight and dropping out all kinds of truth bombs. Anything else that you need people to hear, or you just want to say goodbye to people?
I don't have anything like profound to say right now. Really, my only thing is please know that we're here to help you. Please know that this is legitimately something that I and Dave, I'm sure you could talk about for hours and hours and hours. And we clearly feel very strongly about this because this is how change happens. We talk about being a small fish in this huge institution, this huge sea that is education. We talk about what does it mean to make change? How do me, this small person, go out and do it? You do it by being a part of these conversations. You do it by doing this work yourself, doing this internal reflective work, and then going out and continuing this conversation elsewhere. This is it. This is how the change happens. It happens when like-minded people who want to make change get together and make change. So thank you for being here and for doing and being a part of these conversations, because we're going to do it, guys. I've decided.
That's it. And if Katelynn says it's happening, people. For those of you that might be listening to on the replay or on the podcast, if we don't see your comments live, we get it. Feel free to throw your comments to us. Send us a DM. Throw your comments out on social media. We want to be able to help you as well, or at least connect you with other people that can send you down on your next steps of your journey. So thank you, as always, Katelynn, for being so amazing, helping all of us move that needle just a little bit more and helping us focus on the stuff that matters. You are an absolute rock star. I am Team Katelynn all the way.
Team Schmitto forever. All the Schmitto quotes tonight. Everybody needs to share those with me. Hashtag Schmitto quotes. Also, love this journey that all of you are on. Love this journey for you.
Absolutely. And we will see you all next week. Take care, everybody.